Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're looking at the EU Parliament for the first time ever calling for the sanctioning of a member state. Hungary is the country we're talking about. We're talking about it with Yves Bertoncini, president of the advocacy group Mouvement Européen France, European Movement France. Welcome back as well to Dominic Tarczynski, member of the Polish Parliament from the ruling Law and Justice Party, and from Rome, Lorenzo Marsili, author of Citizens of Nowhere, How to Save Europe from Itself, a co-founder of the pan-European political movement Diem 25. Yves Bertoncini, we're going to take a listen to the words of Jean-Claude Juncker, who told, by the way, France 24 that if he was an MEP, he would have voted for sanctioning Hungary.
The Commission will resist any attack on the rule of law, and we continue to be very concerned by the developments in some of our member states. Article 7 must be applied whenever the rule of law is threatened.
Yves Bertoncini, but as we heard there from Lorenzo Marsili, the problem is that the European Council, there's vetoes, and so therefore it won't happen. However, if you did have the European Parliament that had more of a weight, would that just skew the balance too much in favor of the big states like Germany and France and away from the smaller ones?
Yes, indeed. Even if at the European Parliament, if you compare in terms of demography, smaller states are very well represented. So of course, there are more MEPs from Germany, but if you make a comparison, they can have a voice as well. The nature of the EU is to be based on member states first at the origin. I mean, it was created by member states, and then progressively, there's also a second source of direct legitimacy, which are the citizens, and then the Parliament members directly elected by citizens. The EU is a combination of these two sources of legitimacy. So it's normal to have a parliament voting on a kind of majority base, even if it's two-thirds majority, and to have, in many fields, the same type of qualified majority vote in the council, but in many others, yes, unanimity. And it's what will block this procedure at the end. So
it is just symbolic in the end.
Yes, but the sanctions won't be used, won't be adopted at the end of this procedure, but the sanction will be symbolic, and there will be, unfortunately or fortunately, other type of sanctions. There will be financial sanctions, probably, meaning less structural funds from countries. There would be some political or diplomatic sanctions. And I'm scared by this, by the way, because we are with countries, Poland, Hungary, which don't want to leave the EU. So if we ever go on adopting
if you don't like it,
adopting sanctions against each other, retaliation, it will even get worse. Our crisis of co-owners will be even worse in a situation, and Jean-Claude Juncker underlined this very well in his State of the Union speech, where if we look out of the window, I mean, the world is scary. We should be stronger together. And instead of doing this, because the world is scary, we are arguing each other on rule of law and on many, many other internal, if I may say, internal issues.
Dominic Tarczynski.
Okay, the question is, was Juncker today? Was he? That's the question. If he's the strength of the European Union, thank you very much. Take this symbol. Take these symbolic sanctions. We don't care. Look at my lips. We don't care. If you don't like European Union with Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Italy, and others, you can leave EU. We're not going to leave EU because the fathers of the European Union are about to be saints. They were Christians, Catholics, and we are fighting for the values, for the core values, which were representing people of European Union in the beginning. If you don't like it, you can leave EU. We're not going to go anywhere because this is our European Union. This is our value. Our value is the rule of law.
Hang on, you're talking about Christian. You're talking about Christian values. The values of the European Union are secular values.
No, you're wrong. You are very wrong. If you're going to read what the founders were saying about the European Union, they were very strict about Christian roots of Europe, Christian roots of the European Union, and all this secularism, you can take it to yourself. That's why they will become saints soon in the Catholic Church. So this is why we don't want Muslims and as a majority, because Europe as a continent is Christian for over 1,000 years in Poland. And this is very important. Roman law, Greek philosophers, Christianity as a culture. These are the values, not this rubbish, as we can hear, solidarity, empty words.
Yves Bertoncini, what are the common democratic values that Europe talks about?
Majority.
Mr. Tashinsky, don't be scared. There are no Muslims in Poland, and with all due respect, with Poland, they don't want to invade Poland. I mean, maybe it's good for your political position to say this, but the Muslims, they don't want to invade Poland.
This is good for my family, for my country.
What is at stake is
can't
not
let you
this.
say hateful things like that, Mr. Tarczynski. It's not acceptable.
It's true. It's true. What is not acceptable? What about terrorist attacks? Are they acceptable?
Right, but
when they are calling Allah Akbar,
right,
it's not acceptable.
You cannot use anecdotal evidence to smear an entire religion. That is just not acceptable. Lorenzo.
So why
Lorenzo Marsili, let me ask you this question. We right now are seeing with this vote, yes, it's symbolic, as you were saying in part one of our discussion.
It's not about symbols itself.
Is it, though, nonetheless, the start of grand maneuvers whereby the voting blocks, the poles of influence within the European Union are indeed changing? And in that respect, today's vote is significant. Lorenzo Marsili.
Yes, let me say briefly first that I think the comments of the Polish Member of Parliament betray both the Catholic heritage of Poland and the heritage of the current Polish democracy in the movement of Solidarność. I'm calling from Rome, where a few meters from my home, the Pope, who is the leader of the Catholic Church, has made it very clear that it is the duty of any Christian and of any Catholic to welcome migrants and refugees escaping war.
It's not true.
And this includes Catholics in Poland. And my dear friend, I am a secular individual, but if you want to raise the Catholic flag for your country, you better respect what your Pope demands of you and of your country.
If you are not Catholic, don't tell me how Catholics should be.
I think the whole of the European Union has been given an extraordinary testament of resilience and democratic values in Polish citizens demonstrating and bringing democracy to their own country. And I think the actions of this government in Poland today are first and foremost betraying the very democratic origins of the Polish
democracy. Have you ever been in Poland?
Democracy.
Have you ever been here? Have you ever visited? Have you ever spoken to
anyone? Please, one at a time.
Don't tell me about what you think, you know?
When it comes to your question, and I apologize for adding this introduction, I think this is important to be said. Yes, I think what we are witnessing is the clash of two strategies. One is appeasement. One is the transformation of the People's Party, the European People's Party, into a potential government ally of the new far-right nationalist forces. The model is roughly that of Austria, where the neoliberal People's Party of Kurz governs with the post-fascist party of Hofer. This is one option that Manfred Weber quite clearly outlined a few days ago in an interview to a number of European media.
President of the EPP voting bloc.
The EPP and the far right. Then you have another view within the EPP that says that the EPP should remove the liability of its own nationalist and xenophobic members, such as Orbán's Fidesz, in order not to give more ammunition to the Macron-Verhofstadt duo. I think this is a clash of strategy, and we see this very clearly, and I end with this, in the voting today of the German CSU party, of which Manfred Weber is the vice president. Weber voted in favor of the sanction, but German members of the CSU abstained against. And so you see that they're really trying to do things at once to maintain a potential line of contact and even electoral alliance with the nationalist parties, and at the same time try to demonstrate their European and democratic
You can
credentials.
call us nationalists, you can call us fascists.
One at a time, Dominic Tarczynski, one at a time. Yves Bertoncini, let me ask you, the Austrian Christian Democrats, who are in a coalition as Lorenzo Marsili was saying, with the far right, they voted for sanctions against Hungary. How do you explain that?
But normally, yes, there's a divide. You say they're in a coalition. I mean, there is the Christian Democrats. The EPP is about more or less the conservatives, Christian Democrats. And there are other groups at the European Parliament. Mr. Tashinsky's friends are at the ECR. I mean, it's not the same group, it's not the EPP. And there's also the extreme right. So, yes, we see a split when we talk about the rule of law, as today in Strasbourg, between these two, let's say, right families. You know, there is a split. And of course, it's in the interest of people like Emmanuel Macron to try and divide this bloc, this political bloc, so to get, I mean, most of the EPP, let's say, in the mainstream part of the European Parliament, but to isolate, maybe, people like Mr. Orban. And, well, when I listen to Mr. Tashinsky, who is a defender, a very, I should say, an aggressive defender, Viktor Orban, and a contender of the EPP votes, well, I think, yes, this clarification should happen.
Let's listen to France's president, Emmanuel Macron, who explicitly presents himself as the leader of that anti-illiberal front. Emmanuel Macron, who in recent weeks went to Denmark, went to Finland, and he, in a meeting in Luxembourg last week, goaded the European Parliament's EPP bloc into choosing whether or not they kick Viktor Orban's Fidesz party out of the centre-right bloc.
The clarification has to be made by the European People's Party, not by us and not by me. It is up to them to explain their position. But what is certain is that we cannot be both on the side of Chancellor Angela Merkel and Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
Now, maybe we need to translate some of that for our viewers, because Emmanuel Macron is the leader of a brand new political party in France. He doesn't have a voting bloc right now. Part of what he's saying, it's for political reasons, because there are European elections coming up in the spring.
Of course, and his interest is to have a clarification. I mean, we will send MEPs in the, let's say, centrist group, let's say, Liberal Democrat group. But I mean, up until now, and I mean, it's likely to stay, the EPP group is the first one. It's likely to remain the first one, except if it's divided between two lines. Between, let's say, the mainstream conservative, CDU...
Okay, so how is it being redrawn, the parliament? Right now you've got a main center-right bloc, a main center-left bloc, and you have a centrist which has liberals and greens in the middle.
Liberal Democrat, let's say, Guy Verhofstadt's group, then you have the Social Democrat, and then you have the EPP. But besides the EPP, you have other families I've mentioned, including the European Conservative and Reformist, where the PICH are present. You have also the extreme right. So it's true that for Emmanuel Macron, the best situation would be a split into the EPP family. Maybe either some radical rightists will join other groups of the EPP, so Mr. Orban will join, or
some say that's why he went to Milan to go visit Matteo Salvini.
And by the way, apparently it's connected to Matteo Salvini. Maybe it's a good direction. Or if it does not happen, maybe Mr. Macron's hope is that some of the EPP members will join him, will join the liberal group, because they won't go on sitting with Mr. Orban.
Dominic Tarczynski, let me ask you a question. Would you be in favor of Viktor Orban's Fidesz party joining your group? We heard Nigel Farage trying to woo Orban over to his voting bloc.
Well, this is the decision which is in Viktor Orban's hands. I don't really get involved in their internal politics. Obviously, we are European conservatives, and we would like to be bigger, but it has nothing to do with this European Parliament families. It's about democracy. Radical leftists, communists, Marxists are trying to keep their power and their friends on their chairs, but it's not going to happen. May 2019, ladies and gentlemen, let's wipe them out, all of them. All these leftists who are against democracy, who do not respect the voice of the nations, who wants to rule with their sick way of thinking. Let's leave the voice to the people. Let people decide, and let's change European Parliament in 2019. they're going to cry like a babies.
All right, Lorenzo Marsili, how do you see the landscape being redrawn in those European elections next spring?
I think the great risk is that we're moving from a more traditional anti-European nationalist front that wants to do away with the European Union to a new kind of nationalist Europeanism, whereby the contradiction between Orbán, the Austrians, and Seehofer, whereby the Italians want the migrants in Austria, the Austrians want them in Germany, the Germans want them back to Italy. This contradiction is solved by the vision of a fortress Europe, by the vision of a European Union which is united in its defense of the external borders, come what may, in terms of deaths at sea or over land, is united in terms of a common market that is, however, deprived of any power to bring forward ecological, financial, or social regulations. So we see a transformation of the nationalist bloc into a new vision of a nationalist, xenophobic, closed Europe. And the risk is that this bloc might
What do you mean xenophobic?
What might find a significant alliance with the center-right of the European People's Party, and thereby actually achieve a significant shift in the European common sense, in the European mainstream, around a path that I think might very easily drive to a regional government in Germany run by Merkel's party together with AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland party, in the very near future. This is the risk that I see, and I find the juxtaposition of a liberal pro-European front represented by Macron alone insufficient. I think we need to be able to introduce a new, if you pass me the term, anti-systemic Europeanism. We need to be able to show
You're not
that
able. You're not able.
Can actually
You're mentally communists. Leftists are just like
one at a time, please. Dominik Karczarczynski, let Lorenzo Marsili speak.
So, and my hope for Poland, to be very frank, is that it remains a country where voices such as that of our Polish parliamentary friend can continue to be heard. Because if the vision that Kaczynski represents wins the day in Poland, anybody who dares be slightly off the line, as his utterances today,
we already won.
Would give the media space that he's being given today. And we must stand for the right of free speech for everybody, and we must sanction it when it is being denied to citizens of Europe by their own national government. So I want to close commending once again the European Parliament action of today, and repeating that it demonstrates that a Europe that protects is a Europe that also protects its citizens against the actions of national governments when they turn against the citizens themselves.
I want to remind viewers who are watching us from elsewhere around the world that Europe has sure changed a lot, and that's an understatement. The European Union has had the financial crisis, the Greek debt crisis, the migration crisis, all in the last decade, and now this rule of law crisis, and it's all happening as the bloc has nearly doubled in size. Just to remind us here, there were 10 countries that joined in 2004, including Hungary and Poland, before Romania and Bulgaria joined in 2007, and then Croatia in 2013. It's a very different EU, Yves Bertoncini, than it was before 2004. So what is the right solution now? Is it impossible to have the same values when it comes to governance, when it comes to what is democracy, when you're 28?
I mean, your map is interesting. If we look at the world, not only Europe, if we look at the world, if we compare with China, or if we compare with some countries of Africa, if we look broader, yes, of course, we have common interests and common values, of course. And we are shrinking, by the way. We have 6% of the world population, soon 5%. That's why it creates a kind of cultural anxiety vis-à-vis migration and Islam, by the way, because these are perceived as, you know, the newcomers, and we are shrinking. So in terms of values, yes, when compared with China, we are common. And the same is true for our history. And more importantly, the same is true for our interest. The problem is that if we don't get aware of our common interests, we will be divided. We will be even weaker. We will be divided from abroad, from Moscow, from Beijing, from Washington.
So it's been
and at the end of the day, we won't have any control of our destiny. We won't have any control of our borders, of anything, because divided we fall.
It's been more than a year since we had that election night here in France, where we heard Emmanuel Macron come out to the sound of the European anthem, Ode to Joy, and promising that he would give new life to the meaning of what Europe is. Is he winning or losing that battle?
Well, it's difficult a battle, but at least he is brave enough to engage it with some speeches, striking speeches such as at La Sorbonne. And precisely, I think he's right in insisting on European sovereignty, on European identity, of what makes us united. Of course, united in diversity. Of course, Brussels, Berlin should not interfere in any national, domestic choices. But if we look at the world, if we look out of the windows, we can feel more easily a sense of common interest. And that's what Macron insists on. I think Merkel has said as well that it's now time to take our own destiny into our hands, because simply the world is scary, unstable, and our protector, Uncle Donald, Uncle Trump, is not reliable any longer. So instead of being aggressive toward each other, I think we should look at the windows and finding ways to forge a common destiny. If not, we will have even bigger problems, because the crisis you have mentioned very briefly, and the financial crisis was not born in Europe, but we imported it. The refugee crisis is because we are not able to shape our neighborhood. So it is Iraq and Syria is not our fault, but it came to us. The same is true for Africa. So either we choose to look at the world, to look together at our neighborhood and the world, and maybe we can find a sense of common identity and common sovereignty, or if not, yes, we will be divided, but divided we fall.
Dominic Tarczynski?
If all the leftists in Europe are so happy to receive Muslims, you are very welcome. Take them all, keep them under your roof, and don't tell us what to do. The greatest thing is that today is 335th anniversary of Vienna victory, when Polish King Sobieski stopped Ottoman Empire and saved Europe, and Muslims lost 335 years ago today. He stopped Muslims' aggression, and
Dominic
we're going to stop it now.
We're not talking about that right now. We're talking about
talking about the values and the future of Europe. If you're not talking
so you
about
just define
Europe
yourself vis-a-vis, you define those common values vis-a-vis another religion? Is that what it is?
No. Excusez-moi. The European values are Christian culture, Christian faith, Christian continent as it was, Roman law, Greek philosophers. That's what it is.
Lorenzo Marsili, one final word from you on what the tone of the next year is going to be like, and your thoughts on this idea to, try to give meaning to what it is to be European.
I think if we go towards European elections with a narrative that pits, on the one hand, the so-called nationalists that want to transform Europe upside down, and on the other side, the pro-Europeans that risk appearing like the advocates of continuity of the establishment, then we fall precisely into the trap that Steve Bannon has come to Europe to lay out for us. This was the way that the Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump campaign was won by Donald Trump. You may dislike Donald Trump as much as you want, but at least it's something new compared with what you've seen already. And we risk in the May 2019 elections of having the same kind of argument laid out at a European level across 27 national democracies, which I think
let people decide
for the outcome of that election.
This is democracy.
So I think our duty is to arrive at the May 2019 elections with a very powerful message of European transformation. We need to show citizens how a political can deliver economic protection, can deliver economic justice, closure of tax havens, can deliver social justice, can deliver protection, can deliver a humane and effective migration policy. This is all within our grasps, but we need a new pro-European narrative that aims to transform the continent, because we cannot allow the dystopians and the nationalists to be the last visionaries in the European panorama. And that's something that we're risking.
All right, we've with so much more to talk about in what you say there and what the rest of our panel has been saying. Unfortunately, we're short on time, but I want to thank you so much, Lorenzo Marsili, for joining us from Rome, Dominic Tarczynski for being with us from Warsaw, Yves Bertoncini here in the studio. More to come on this as we head towards those elections in the spring, those European elections. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.